Happy Friday to all of my fabulous math students. Even though I can't be with you in person today, I have created an Explain Everything recording so that way we can still do our notes together. Please take a quick minute and pause and use the agenda on the board to make sure that your homework log is all caught up to date, and then turn to the next spot in your notebook and start today's notes with today's essential question. Today our question is, explain what makes a zero pair and why we're allowed to remove them when comparing expressions. Remember that our EQ is what's guiding our day. It's the question that we definitely need to be able to answer by the end of the session, and that's what shows me as the teacher that you guys have learned what I was expecting you to learn for the day. We are going to start off today's session with two teacher examples. I've taken some pictures of some algebra tiles here, and then we'll jump into our book questions at the end of the period. So for example 1, you guys don't need to copy these pictures down into your notes, but instead we're going to rewrite the simplified expressions. So take a look at the left side and take a look at the right side, and I want you to just think for a minute about what we would need to do to simplify each side. So hopefully what you're thinking, and hopefully I'm reading your mind right now, is that on the right-hand side, we can take those tiles and we're going to move them to the top. And when we move them, we know that we flip them. So I'm going to go ahead and draw them as flipped tiles. I'm just going to put an X through the bottom showing that we have now moved those. Now let's take a peek at my left and my right-hand side. So my left-hand side, I have an X tile and a +2. On my right-hand side, I have an X, but before I can simplify my singles, we do have a zero pair up there. So hopefully you guys have identified your zero pair here as a +1 and a -1. So we learned this whole past week about zero pairs and how we're able to remove them from my mat. So what I'm left with is 2 of these that are unshaded. And what we've talked about this week is that when our tiles are unshaded, that represents a negative. So now what I'm comparing on the left is I have x + 2, and on the right I have x - 2. Well, on Wednesday we talked about how do I compare when I have a variable? Well, if we have the exact same variable on both sides, that means that they're exactly the same. So I am able to take that variable and I don't have to consider it when I'm comparing my mats. So on my left-hand side I have a +2, and on the right-hand side I have a -2. So we would say that the left is greater. So take a quick second, and what I would like on your paper for notes for this slide is for you to put left, write your x + 2, put right, and write down x - 2. Then I want your final answer, that the left is greater. So these notes are just like we did for Wednesday's notes in class and Thursday's notes in class. So we have 2 comparison mats where we are simplifying the mat and then we are comparing the expression to decide which side is greater. For example 2 of my teacher-created slide, I am showing you some new algebra tiles. And before we begin, I would like you to think about what do I need to do to each side to simplify. Now that you have a picture in your head, let me show you what happens when I flip my tiles. So I'm going to take my 2 tiles down here and flip them, and take my single tile here and flip them. And I actually took a picture of what they look like flipped. So let's see if my picture matches what you are thinking in your head. So hopefully this is what you were envisioning in your head. I know that typically we're using our iPads and you guys are doing the flipping, but today we can't have iPads when I'm not in the classroom. So we are just going to be following along with my example up here on the board. So let's check out my left-hand side. So on my left-hand side, I have an X. Let me grab my writing tool. I have an X. And then I have +2 tiles. On my right, I have an X, But before I simplify, hopefully you are noticing that I have a 0 pair. So I'm going to circle that 0 pair. Any 0 pairs can be removed from my mat, so I'm just going to cross them off. And then I'm left with plus 2. So in this case, again, this is example 2. What I want written on your paper is left, the word left, and your expression, the word right, and your expression. Then our question says which is greater. So in this case, we would say that they are equal. They are equal. Now, some of you might be thinking, but Mrs. G, we didn't remove the x. I still can remove the x just like in our last problem, because when we're comparing two things, if I have exactly the same thing on both sides, I am allowed to remove it. So we would actually be able to remove those x's. So I'm truly comparing 2 to 2, which is the same. So they are equal. So keeping this example in mind, I'm now going to challenge you to think outside the box a little bit. I'm going to show you the one from our book, and I want to see who can come up with the right answer. So this is 2-57. So in your notes, go ahead and title it correctly. Say 2-57. It's asking us to build the expression comparison mat with algebra tiles. So instead of building it today, we are going to pause and draw this shape. So I would like you to draw this comparison mat on your paper. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the recording, and once you guys have it drawn, we'll go ahead and push play and pick right back up where we started. So just take a quick minute, and I would like you to sketch that expression comparison mat on your paper. So part A says simplify the expressions using legal moves. We've talked a lot about what are we allowed to move and how do we move things. So when we're coming down here to our mat, let me grab my pointer tool here. Okay, so when we come down here to our mat, anytime we have something that's shaded, that's considered a positive. And anytime I have something that's unshaded, that's considered a negative tile. So our first thing, before we are allowed to answer this question, before I'm able to, which is greater, we need to simplify. So everybody work on their left-hand mat. I would like you to flip your tile down here and then find any 0 pairs. Then on the right, I'd like you to flip these tiles to the top and cross off any 0 pairs. So take a quick minute and do that next step. So see if your steps match mine. I moved my positive tile to the top and made it a negative. Then I moved my 6 positive tiles to the top and I made them negative. Mine kind of look like circles, so just forgive me. They're supposed to be squares, but I just made circles. Do you notice after I move them, I just cross it off? So that way on my mat, I'm not having to redraw my mat every single time, but instead I can keep reusing the same mat. So now from here, I would like us to identify any 0 pairs and let's cross them off. So I'm going to change colors. So here I have a 0 pair, a positive one and a negative one. And then on the right hand side, here I have a 0 pair. I'm going to cross them off. That's pretty much all we can cross off. So now let's read and simplify what I have left. So on my left hand side, I'm going to write the word left. Then I'm going to write the word right. Let's talk about what we have left over. So on my left-hand side, I have a lot of x's. How many do I have? 3. So I have 3 x's. Then I have 2 open circles or squares. And my open squares stand for negatives. So I'm going to say I have 3x minus 2. This is what we've been practicing all week, so you guys should be hanging in there with me today, I hope. On my right-hand side, I have 1x. And then check out what I have. I have all of these negatives plus these negatives. So I have 6, 7, 8. Is there anything else I can do to simplify this a little bit? Because I've never had a problem like this before. This is a little different, right? So I'm working on part A still. I'm using all my legal moves that I developed in 2.1.5. there's actually one more move that we haven't done yet that we've learned about last week. And that is, what can I do when they both have an x in common? I am allowed to cross that x off. So let's check out what I have now. So now on my left, I would have a 2x minus 2. And on my right, I would have a negative 8. So they both basically lost an x. But this is strange. We've never had a problem where there hasn't been the exact same amount of x's on both sides. So we did part A. This is part A. We did it completely. We simplified as much as possible. Part B says, how can you tell which expression is greater? Explain in a few sentences on paper and then be prepared to share your conclusion with the class. So check out my two expressions here. I have that one and that one. How can you tell which expression is greater? I want you to think about this, and on Monday when I get back, I'm going to be coming by and I'll be looking for the best answer to share with the class and to earn some pink tickets. So on your own, I want you just to be thinking about part B, because the answer is not one answer. It's not a concrete, there's not just a single answer. There's a couple different ways to explain this problem. So again, you're going to work on this on your own, and then I will be checking answers on Monday, and we'll pick up on Monday with the answer to part B. So part B, I'm going to put a question mark. So for the rest of today, oh, and just a reminder, when you're using your ebook, so here's your ebook, which you guys all know already, but it's always good to remind you. Under your tools in your ebook, if you click on tools and then tiles, you can choose any background you want. So in this case, we're still working on our comparison mats, which is greater. And then under algebra tiles, you are able to click and drag any of the tiles that you need to and tap on them and make them negative. So we've been working a lot this week with these. So this is just a reminder for when you get home of how you can access these algebra tiles at any time. So I do hope that all of you guys have a wonderful rest of your Friday and a fabulous weekend. I will be back with you on Monday. And what you're going to do next with Miss Crosby is your Mad Minute quiz. So I know you guys are going to rock it. Best of luck to you. Remember, the goal is just to improve our previous score. So I know you're going to do great. See you guys on Monday.